And the Oscar goes to Dances with Wolves.
Go home! Go home!
In 1990, a groundbreaking film called Dances with Wolves made history by depicting Native American culture and characters in a realistic way on the big screen. An unusual friendship develops between a white soldier and the Lakota Sioux tribe in the epic Western film starring Kevin Costner. It broke records at the movie office and took home 7 Oscars thanks to its majestic scope, heartfelt plot, and respectful portrayal of indigenous peoples. Underneath Dances with Wolves' stunning visuals and poignant story lie disturbing aspects you might not have known. Let's review what happened that surprised Dances with Wolves viewers. Dances with Wolves was inspired by Michael Blake's fascination in Native American culture, which he developed after reading historical accounts of their oppression. He enthusiastically penned a screenplay for a Western film and realized the potential in presenting a story from the Native American point of view. But Blake was still a driven writer who lacked any connections in the Hollywood industry. He broke over in 1983 with his first produced picture script, Stacy's Nights, which starred the then unknown actor Kevin Costner. Despite the film's lack of success, it connected Blake with the man who would eventually adapt Dances with Wolves for the big screen. A few years down the road, Blake brought up the idea of a Western with his buddy Kevin. Costner, sensing Blake's talent, encouraged him to expand the idea into a novel before presenting it as a screenplay. Taking Costner up on his suggestion, Blake spent the following year devoting himself fully to the text. He finished writing Dances with Wolves in 1986, but publishers kept turning it down. Once the Western genre was no longer popular, most people didn't see much use in watching them. An independent publishing house didn't release it until they had more than 30 requests. Once the book was out in the public, Kevin Costner wanted to make a movie out of it that would do justice to Blake's grand vision. He quickly learned, though, that the majority of Hollywood studios shared the publisher's skepticism about the financial viability of Westerns. After disappointments like Heaven's Gate, Costner faced rejection from studio after studio due to concerns about the film's runtime and the industry's overall disinterest in Westerns. Because Costner would not budge on the plot's length or breadth, he went out and got finance from investors abroad. He also inked a distribution deal with Orion Pictures for pre-production. Unfortunately, the budget ended up being far more than anticipated, so Costner had to shell out a substantial amount of his own money to see the project through to completion. In a strange turn of events, Costner initially declined to direct himself, despite his firm confidence in Blake's book and enthusiastic support for its adaptation. He sent the screenplay to a number of renowned filmmakers of the time in the hopes that they would all see the film through to its completion. Regrettably, everyone attempted to convince him to alter the script in some way, whether it was by removing the opening Civil War montage or by having the white love interest replaced with a Native American. Costner, who had never directed a film before, accepted the risk of helming the project himself because he was unwilling to compromise on what he saw as crucial plot elements. He was certain that, given his mental images, he was the only one capable of bringing the narrative to the big screen. The tension behind the scenes was amplified by the deteriorating friendship between Blake and Costner. Their friendship blossomed into animosity after years of collaboration, when Blake's macho attitude offended many in Hollywood. When their argument escalated to the point where they were about to physically attack each other, Costner banished his buddy from his house. Blake, who was living paycheck to paycheck, was forced to wash dishes at an Arizona Chinese restaurant in order to make ends meet. In spite of this, he kept calling Costner, seeking both help and approval to read the screenplay. Despite Costner's repeated refusals, he eventually wired Blake some money to tide him over. After months of resistance, Costner finally agreed to study Blake's writings. To Costner's surprise, it was fantastic, even though he probably expected nothing new from his annoying pal. It was the most vivid description of a scene he had ever read, he claimed. Costner wasted no time getting filming on Dances with Wolves underway after the two men quickly put their differences aside and became friends again. The contentious character representation. Although there are some fictitious aspects in Dances with Wolves, the fascinating backstories of some of the main characters are inspired by or based on real historical individuals. The real-life Civil War soldier John Dunbar is the inspiration for Kevin Costner's character, Lieutenant Dunbar. This Dunbar was born into a missionary family and spent his formative years immersed in the Pawnee culture. He went on to teach the language to college students. His writings were crucial in preserving Pawnee culture and history. Michael Blake, who wrote the script, claimed he had no knowledge the genuine Dunbar existed until he saw the name on a roster from an ancient army. Although Dunbar in the film is a fictitious character, Blake incorporated authentic Native American cultural elements according to the real Dunbar's surviving testimonies. For example, the character of Dunbar's love interest, Stands with a Fist, is based on a genuine lady's life. When Blake wrote about the White Widow who was taken in by the Comanches following the brutal slaughter of her family, he was referring to a particular source. Stands with a Fist was influenced by the incredible life of Cynthia Ann Parker. In 1836, when Parker was 9 years old, her settlement was attacked by the Comanche, who massacred her family and neighbors. Fortunately, Parker survived. She married Petanuna, chief of the Comanche people, and assimilates fully into tribal life during her 24 years of captivity. During this time, she forgets her English. Similar to Stands with a Fist, Parker faced difficulties assimilating into white society following his recapture by the Texas Rangers in 1860. Throughout her very brief life, she remained a Comanche at heart and was unable to reunite with her remaining biological relatives. While penning Stands with a Fist, Michael Blake undoubtedly drew inspiration from parts of her history and her work to unite different cultures. With Kevin Costner at the helm, the character also gained some weight from real life. Costner rode a horse and performed other feats himself for the film. While filming a pivotal buffalo hunting scene, he almost perished after falling off a horse. But he conquered several physical challenges to portray the tough Lieutenant Dunbar. Costner had always intended to cast mostly unknown performers in supporting roles before he ever became a director. He recruited several Native Americans without training in acting to strengthen the Sioux tribe. In a similar vein, he made her acting debut in Stands with a Fist by casting his daughter Annie in the role of the youngster. Dances with Wolves stood out from other westerns because of the presence of inexperienced, non-professional performers who brought an extra layer of realism and creativity to the sequences featuring the tribe. Much of the dialogue between Sioux characters is also delivered in the Lakota language, which is in danger of extinction. With Doris Leader-Charge as their guide, Costner made sure the actors set it to the best of their abilities. Nevertheless, not even the most seasoned performers could decipher the complex Lakota language. This led to the elimination of features like gendered speech, which alters the definitions of words for both. Simultaneously portraying strong warriors conversing in feminine tones, the simplified Lakota thrilled some native speakers. An unusual risk for a big Hollywood movie was the choice to include a long subtitled Lakota dialect, but it made tribal situations far more realistic and authentic. Unlike the cliched, grunting braves of previous westerns who were unable to speak anything more than pidgin English, this film's vocabulary is sophisticated. Difficulties in producing a film. The enormously complex and laborious process of adapting Kevin Costner's 3-hour epic Dances with Wolves for the big screen was no small feat. Hundreds of people, including 3,500 bison, 300 horses, and thousands of Native American extras, were involved in the production of the Western, which entailed setting elaborate scenarios at 30 separate locations in Wyoming and South Dakota. Additional difficulties arose from dealing with unpredictable weather, financial limitations, and animals with unpredictable temperaments. Still, as a first-time director, Costner accomplished the unbelievable, giving life to his grandiose project. In terms of scope and depth, the logistics needed were enormous. Transporting and lodging hundreds of cast and crew workers at each site along with procuring thousands of buffalo and horses, was part of the intricate filming script that took place throughout the wide prairies. In addition, everyone involved was subjected to the extremes of South Dakota's unpredictable weather for over half a year due to the production schedule. From July to November, the temperatures that were recorded varied greatly, going from a freezing 20 degrees Fahrenheit to a blistering 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The crew and equipment had a hard time filming in the cold, while anyone working outside were more likely to get sunburned, dehydrated, and exhausted in the hot temperatures. Any filmmaker, but especially a first-timer like Costner, would have struggled to manage all of these many moving parts. It was not easy to work with creatures who were extremely sensitive. Managing a stampede of hundreds of bison to achieve the famous scene of the film's climactic buffalo hunting sequence was another logistical difficulty. Before starting the tedious process of gathering the herd again, the team had just one opportunity each day to film the stampede. It took more than 3 weeks to shoot, despite having a whole crew, helicopters, 10 camera trucks, and 20 wranglers on site. Chief Wrangler Rusty Hendrickson famously said, "When buffalo start running, they don't stop." The enormous animals were extremely challenging to control. From strategic locations, cameras had to try to film the rumbling herd as it rushed by. Amazing video was captured by the crew, but to get some close-up shots, they had to use 2 bison that were tamed, one of which was Mammoth, the bison of artist Neil Young. But even with these tamer creatures, a lot of persistence and temptation were needed to get the job done. By offering the reliable bison Cody his favorite snack, Oreo cookies, handlers managed to get him to charge the cameras. Along with Costner's lupine companion Two Socks, a wolf was originally scripted to perform the role. Despite extensive training, the 2 wolves used in the project, Buck and Teddy, remained unpredictable when filmed. Spending a lot of time and using food incentives to get the animals to cooperate was required to get the wolf shots that were needed. Costner and director Jim Wilson were among the team members who went to extreme lengths to obtain the shots, even imitating wolf howls. It was a daring move for Costner to bring his grand frontier narrative to life in the face of logistical hurdles, erratic weather, nervous animals, and his lack of expertise as a first-time director. It was almost unbelievable that filming did not devolve into complete anarchy in light of the difficulties. The reaction from society. Because of its respectful treatment of Native American tribes and its cultural awareness, the 1990 film Dances with Wolves made a huge splash when it came out. This positive depiction was groundbreaking after decades of stereotypical portrayals in old Hollywood westerns. It did a wonderful job of capturing the complexity of indigenous cultures and giving Native characters deep dimension. Behind the scenes, cultural sensitivity was a priority for director Kevin Costner, who brought in Lakota advisors to check on the accuracy of the costumes, language, and way of life. Setting a new standard for mainstream cinema, almost 25% of the dialogue was delivered in Lakota with English subtitles. Traditional motifs were painstakingly painted onto each teepee in the Sioux camp, with the approval of Lakota scholars. Hairstyles were custom-made for each model, and the clothes included elaborate beadwork. Films portraying indigenous peoples have mostly ignored their rich cultural traditions. This period piece, however, painstakingly recreates 19th century Lakota life. The activist and actor Russell Means regarded DWWW as a chance to finally bring attention to the universal humanity of indigenous peoples' cultures. This kind approach was touching for Native American viewers. The experience of witnessing an honorable representation on television that mirrored his background and ethnicity had a profound effect on actor Wes Studdard's emotional development. Even though Studdard was a Cherokee from Oklahoma, he hardly saw fully realized Native American characters in Hollywood films or television shows. Growing up in the 1950s, he saw that Tonto, the Lone Ranger's sidekick, was one of the few Native American faces on television since there wasn't much positive representation on film. Instead of showing indigenous people as vicious barbarians, Viewers of DDW finally got to see a diverse group of indigenous people portrayed as multifaceted individuals shaped by their culture. In the face of territorial ambitions from European settlers, the film followed the Lakota people as they fought for survival. Rather of the usual representation of nameless, grunting braves or esoteric healers with pidgin English, viewers were treated to complex characters and a well-oiled community. It showed how the horrors of displacement, cultural loss, and violence had devastating effects on subsequent generations. Beyond the cultural importance, DDW altered the Hollywood environment for Native American performers. There was a severe lack of indigenous representation in media at the time it was published. But DDW's critical praise and financial success brought it to the attention of the general public, demonstrating the necessity of narrative led by native speakers. More complex and made-up positions were able to emerge as a result. Wes Studdard says the picture was the catalyst for his acting career, which led to parts like Magua in 1992's The Last of the Mohicans and other critically acclaimed films. Many other Native American performers have benefited from the chances presented by DWW. The Green Mile, Thunderheart, Maverick, and Transamerica were among Graham Greene's subsequent roles after playing Kicking Bird. Goon and Die Hard with a Vengeance were two of Rodney Grant's subsequent film appearances after his role as Wind in His Hair. Black Shaw was performed by Tanti Cardinal, who has been in several plays, including Smoke Signals and Legends of the Fall. When asked about his portrayal of the vicious Pawnee chief, Studdard gushed, "At least the guy is truly native rather than a bankable performer in Redface." He went on to call his performance a classic villain role. With its stellar cast of Native Americans, DWW proved that their stories could resonate with a wide audience and was a significant step forward for the next wave of Native American performers. Actors Gil Birmingham, Kimberly Guerrero, and Zach McLaren have all discussed how the film motivated them to become activists and actors in order to promote Indigenous peoples' representation in the industry. Viewers of Graham Greene's nuanced portrayal of the Sioux sacred character Kicking Bird came to the realization that more complex Native roles were within the realm of possibility. Even after all these time has passed, DDWW is still cited as an influence by aspiring local performers. This suggests that showing their cultures in an empathetic light can be well received. Still, many point to DWW as the catalyst that finally set in motion the slow but steady shift toward more nuanced and prominent Native representation in film and television. Native American showrunner Sterling Harjo's Reservation. Dogs on FX has been getting rave reviews for its compassionate and funny take on Native American life in the contemporary day. If future generations of Indigenous filmmakers are serious about increasing their own visibility in the industry, they may look to DWW as a guiding light. Uncover hidden truths about wolves in a dance. Many have criticized Dances with Wolves for its unbelievable plot twists, despite the positive reviews it received for its historically accurate depiction of Native Americans. The idea of a white soldier befriending members of the Lakota Sioux tribe caused some viewers distress. Regarding the film's overall historical and cultural correctness, historian Gary Edelman rated it a shaky 6. One main gripe is that Dunbar's heroic rescue of the tribe is overdone in the film. The extreme oppression that Native Americans endured at that era makes his extraordinary kindness and reverence for them appear unbelievable. Rather of addressing white cruelty, the script appears to promote a white savior myth. The more nuanced Lakota heroes stand in stark contrast to the one-dimensionally violent and aggressive Sioux antagonists. Thus, there are hints of bias in the character representations, yet the descriptions themselves are not intentionally biased. Adelman also pointed out a few small mistakes in the medical and combat sequences. He claimed that, considering the period's usual limitations on weaponry, the first sniper shot into an open battlefield was highly unlikely. While exposed, soldiers would have greatly benefited from defensive obstacles and cover, neither of which were present in the corridor. In contrast to the terrifying and primitive emergency field operation shown, Adelman emphasized that anesthesia was routinely administered during the procedure to amputate Dunbar's injured limb. According to him, skilled doctors during the Civil War successfully amputated several limbs as routine, although painful, procedures. Consequently, Dances with Wolves glosses over several minor historical details while ignoring crucial realities about the plight of Native Americans. The enormous human toll of the Civil War, however, had led to a significant expansion in medical and tactical knowledge, as Adelman pointed out. Even though it is oversimplified and somewhat based on truth, Dances with Wolves moved viewers because it gave Native Americans heroic roles, which was a rare occurrence in Hollywood at the time. Supporters and healers from all walks of life fought for a glimmer of hope despite the much worse reality. Despite its flaws, Dances with Wolves was well received by critics and viewers alike for its accurate depiction of Native American culture. Best Picture and Best Director went to Kevin Costner, among many other accolades, for the record-breaking film. The cultural impact isn't the only interesting story that came out of the huge Western production. In a ceremony that included placing an eagle feather in Costner's hair, the Sioux Nation honored him as an honorary member, despite their initial doubts about a white leader. The film's focus on their everyday lives, rather than preconceived notions, was something they really enjoyed. Costner, on the other hand, lost favor after buying the Holy Black Hills area for a resort, a move that was later abandoned because to resistance. The narrative of Dunbar protecting the tribe is continued in a sequel novel by Michael Blake, which might form the basis for a miniseries. The Holy Road has gotten good reviews for touching on weighty topics like westward expansion in a non-preachy way. There have been ongoing rumors about turning the sequel into a miniseries. Orion Pictures, the brains behind the film's worldwide smash hit, cleverly targeted men and women with romance or action-themed trailers and ads. The strategy was a smashing success. At $424.2 million, Dances with Wolves became the highest-grossing Western movie all time in the last quarter of a century. It was the best Western ever. I find it interesting that in its 6 months of running, it never topped the weekly box office rankings. With an extended version that stretched over 4 hours, Dances with Wolves, originally about 3 hours long, became one of the rare Best Picture winners to approach the length of Lawrence of Arabia and Gone with the Wind. More time was spent on the stage production than on The Lord of the Rings. Not only was it enormous, but John Barry's score was as impressive. The renowned Bond composer supposedly appreciated Pope John Paul II's Major John Dunbar theme. Many predicted that Martin Scorsese would take home the trophy for Best Director for Goodfellas, but Kevin Costner's breakout performance caused a stir about actors moving into producing. The Departed was Scorsese's eventual triumph. Costner, monetarily speaking, performed really well, taking home $40 million. His dogged pursuit of his heartfelt goal paid off. Spending $250,000 on an animatronic bison was only one example of the extravagant detail that resulted from that resolve. Careful consideration was given to every detail in order to transport viewers to the era. Later on, Costner helped preserve history by funding an educational display on the effects of westward expansion on bison that was located close to the filming sites. To experience the film as live history, fans may even arrange tours of the South Dakota locales today. Dances with Wolves properly introduced Native American stories to mainstream film as never before, despite its shortcomings as a historical and dramatic work. The film shattered Western genre norms and irrevocably eliminated disdainful biases. Do you find Dances with Wolves to be a satisfactory film? Please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comment section. Enjoyed your viewing.